So it's been quite the morning. I got to put some hand lotion on. Uh, my mummified body, if I don't use hand lotion, if I touch the screen on the camera, the capacitance doesn't recognize my finger because my bony mummified finger doesn't have enough of an electrical charge to get the camera going. So I have to put cream on my hands and do crazy fingers for a while to get the circulation going. Because if I don't, the camera doesn't recognize the touch of my finger and it won't come on. So I got a lot going through my mind this morning. So normally in the morning I get up and with so much going on in the world, I go to Canadian Prepper and I go to Grand Supreme News Channel and a few others to check on, whether anybody pushed the button or not. So I got a notice this morning that Bear Independent was going live about the situation in the Middle East. And I got to tell you, I'm not slandering the man, but he totally blew his witness with me because I'm always very polite regardless, because my witness to me is precious. And that being said, I want to apologize to Leanne Terubiates because she questioned me and my channel about the times, and she said it's not time to make any silly videos. And the deal with the silly videos every so often is that YouTube has got a certain watch limit that you have to meet to keep your channel alive. And back when my channel was morphing into what it is today, it went from being an online diary to what it is today, trying to pray and help people, because time is so short. I believe that the rapture is very close. So Leanne was like, well, don't make any silly videos, just, be consistent. But the thing is, you're walking this line. You're walking this line between, am I going to keep the channel alive? Or, am I going to do a silly video every so often to keep the watch hours up and keep the channel alive? So I don't know that she understood that, but I was having a bad day and I was kind of irritated. And I ran into the same thing with Bear Independent this morning, where I followed his channel for a long time. And he's very handsome, very rugged. Things that quite honestly have always been a problem for me, because I was raised by two blue bloods, and my father did things to me that were horrible, like using me as an ashtray to crush his cigarette out on, electrocuting me a few times with his little experiments and his jokes. He thought that was funny. punching me in the face and knocking me down the basement stairs, and then almost beating me to death when I was 11. And 11 was a bad year for me. My sister cornered me in the kitchen and held a knife to my belly. And I can guarantee you she would have cut me and gutted me like a fish if I had looked at her the wrong way or if I hadn't backed down. She was angry that she gave my mother $20 for rent. And my mother very foolishly dissed her by turning around and handing me the $20 like it was no big deal. And being a foolish little kid, I didn't realize that I was being used as a cudgel against my sister by my mother. And my mother almost got me stabbed because my sister was that angry that my mother handed me the $20 that she had disregarded coming from my sister. That kind of stupid stuff, you know. And my father was no different. And so I grew up fast, and I grew up being the adult in the family when everybody else was acting like a fool, you know. And in any case, it left a hunger in my spirit for the witness of a true father. Even though my father and I were estranged ever since I was a toddler because of something that he did to my brother. We went to a white-only beach back in 1959, and karma bit us in the ass. And we went in a 1959 rent-a-car, a beautiful robin egg blue Chevy Impala Super Sport convertible with a red interior, really weird color combination for a rental car. And it was like I don't know how to put it tongue in cheek. It was like birth control after the fact, because my father and my mother are driving along, and my brother and I are literally crawling out on the trunk of the car going down the road to touch the antennas. It had two antennas coming out of its butt, like one of those cockroaches that has the two antennas. And my brother and I were trying to reach out to the antennas and hold on to them, you know, crawling out on the trunk lid. And my father would look up in the mirror. He didn't slow down or anything. My father always said that he would raise the ones that lived. So we came back with second-degree burns from being at this beach that had no protection, no umbrellas or anything. And my brother and I had these awful bubbles on our skin, just like crackling. And so my brother was out on the back porch eating a grilled cheese sandwich like a little squirrel and minding his own business. And my father came out and dumped some Old Spice cologne in his hand and then slapped it onto my brother's belly and chest on the second-degree burns. And my brother threw that cheese grill up in the air and ran out of the room, wah! Screaming like an old woman. And then Buck turned around for me, and I was like gauging how to run between his legs. And I ran between his legs and out the room. And from that point on, from a toddler on, I had nothing to do with my father, would not trust him, would not talk to him, would not come near him. He would say, "Come here, boy." I'd be like, "No." "Come here, boy." "No." "I'm your father." "Yes." "Come here, boy." "No." Like that. And so that made him very angry. And believe me, he took it out on me. And so when I came up, I'd wanted to be a doctor. And when I got put out of the house at 15, because I'd started to work on garbage trucks and the gas stations, and I was getting all beefy, and my father was afraid. It just occurred to me recently as to why my father put me out. He put me out because he was afraid that I was getting so beefy that one day I would retaliate and beat his ass for everything that he did to me, using me like an ashtray to put his cigarette out on. I still have that mark on my belly, and I slapped his hand away with the cigarette. And he was like, "Boy, you don't slap the hand of your father." And the cigarette went onto his brand new wool carpeting. And that was what he was ticked off about, was the carpeting, rather than he had just crushed a cigarette out on his son. So that was the environment I grew up in. And I always tended to idolize certain men in my life that were masculine and kind and everything my father wasn't. And my father at times tried for a relationship, and I would rebuff him, or I had times of weakness where I would try and he would rebuff me. We never got together on the same page until he got born again when he was 77. And for 3 years, he was my best buddy and confidant. And I was on at his deathbed, patting his hand, telling him that I loved him and that everything was okay. But being as he'd never apologized for what he did to me, that was very difficult, but God gave me the grace. So the thing that changed my life when I was 15, getting put out of the house, wanting to be a doctor, it didn't occur to me to go over to the neighbor's house and ask her if I could live at her house, because she had a huge house and a basement, and I could have rented the basement room and stayed with her. She was a very brilliant woman. She was actually part of the French underground in WW2. She loved me like a son. And believe me, she would have seen that I went to medical college. I would have had a totally different outcome. But instead, like I said, I wound up sleeping in cars and working on garbage trucks and working in gas stations. And I had a lot of heart because I wanted to be muscular and rugged like the other men. And so when I worked on the garbage truck, I would literally almost pull my guts out trying to lift stuff that was too heavy for me and to keep up with the much older men who were in their late 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, as I worked for different companies and situations. I worked for one guy who literally loaded the barrel up loaded me up like a pack mule and would beat the crap out of me if I didn't keep up. And he did mean stuff like, just as I was getting to the truck to dump the garbage in the truck, he would drive off. Another guy that I worked with, being as I was a little kid, as I was at the back of the truck dumping the garbage in, he'd sneak up behind me and grab me and lift me up and try and put my legs in the back of the truck and act like he was going to pack me with the garbage. So that's the way that I was brought up, and I came up, and a lot of people use me in different ways. Like they'd buy you something to eat, and then you say, "Well, I don't have any money," and they're like, "Well, come on over to the house and get with wifey and me, and that'll pay off the meal." That kind of deal when I was just a kid living in halfway houses with drug addicts and homosexuals and prostitutes and all of this stuff that I can't even talk about on my channel because my channel's a family channel. But it occurred to me during my whole life working for garbage companies and all that I was always trying to be the manly, rugged individual because my grandfather took my hand one day and he said, "These are the hands of a bookkeeper or an accountant," because I was very frail and fair-skinned when I was a little kid. But in any case, to stay on point, various people at times in my life tried to impact me, and some were good. I had a sister who I taught how to drive when I was 17. She was 42. When she got her license, she took me around to porno flicks and bars and hotels and stuff. And that got out of hand. And I got to the point after I got born again where I couldn't look at her. And she'd come over for a picnic with my family, and I would get up and leave because I was so ashamed of what we had done. You know, we'd go out to a meal after a porno movie, and she would slip off her shoe and run her feet into my crotch under the table, and she thought that was daring and funny. And see, fam, sin always seems like it's daring and exciting until you realize, especially in the presence of a holy God, what you've done. So, like I said, I had a few good influences, many bad influences coming up. I had a brother-in-law who was very rugged, and he reminded me of this next person I'm going to talk to you about, which is a reason for this video. I had a brother-in-law who was he was one of the super army guys during the Vietnam War. I forget what they call them. And they went out beforehand and slithered around and took out the enemy before the rest of their group would come. And so this guy got religious, and he had this great big pickup truck, and he took me to his church up in Frederick one morning, and there wasn't a big enough parking space for the truck. So he pulled in the front of the parking space, and there was a Toyota Corolla, I think it was. And so he pushed the other person's parked car with his pickup truck and parked the pickup truck and then went into the church. So you don't know what damage he did to the other guy's parked car, to the gearbox or transmission or whatever, pushing the thing to make a parking space for himself to go to church. And that was the only time I went with him, was that one time. But he reminds me of this guy, Bear Independent. And I'm not slandering this guy because I'm just telling you what happened this morning. I've been following Bear's channel for a long time, and he's very handsome and rugged and all of that other stuff. And he was doing a situation report on the Middle East, and he always blends religion into his channel, and he'll tell you how he's such a good guy using his bulldozer to clear people's land and help people and all that other stuff. And he calls God Yah. So I'm very intent I'm a good listener. My father used to call me Sony. So I'm live chatting with him as usual. And I had heard of Yahweh, and I was raised Catholic. I was raised Catholic, and then I went to a Presbyterian church, and I went to camp at this church, and one of the camp counselors, Steve, turned out to be a pedophile, and my whole camp book was pictures of Steve, and he'd have two boys under one arm and two boys under another arm, and he would throw himself down on a bed or a sofa with four boys under his arms. And so it wasn't until I got back from camp and put all the pictures in my scrapbook, and here's Steve, and he's dressed up like an angel, and he's got two boys under one arm, two boys under another arm. Every picture in the background was Steve hugging up on some boys, you know? So I left that church, and it's a very famous church, so I'm not going to mention the name of it, but it's a very prestigious Presbyterian church. And the other camp counselors, Russ and Bobby, they were the real deal. They were the real deal, I can tell you. And they showed me the love of God without doing anything that would warp you. But in any case, I went from Catholic to Presbyterian. Then I went to Baptist, and the Baptist experience, I went to one Baptist church, Pooks Hill Baptist, and the pastor was versed in classic literature and all. Fascinating man to listen to. He left that church, and then I didn't go back after that. And then I started going to Pentecostal churches that had more of the move of the Spirit, and that suited me better. And then I went from Pentecostal to oneness, and oneness wasn't scripturally correct. So I went back to a Pentecostal church and then settled on the African Methodist Episcopal church where my letter is now. And I went there because of my boss, and his family taught me the love of God and how to give somebody a godly hug, because my family was not huggy kissy, I can tell you. And I'd go to work, and Mr. Sam's mother would say, "Come here, boy, and give me a hug." She'd hug on me. I'd be like a limp, dead fish, not knowing how to return affection because I was more or less feral. And I had other people that tried to help me. For example, I cut grass when I was 11 years old for this guy that worked for the government. And it turned out that he would go overseas to Bangkok and Taiwan to get with little boys. And he said I could make more money working inside the house. Long story short, I carried the laundry up to his bedroom, and he had a bar on top of the dresser. He made me a Gibson, which is a martini with no olive but an onion. And so, not knowing about things being spiked and all, I woke up later on that day in his bed with him cuddling me. And so I can't go into any more of that, but I learned as I went along. This is at 11 years old now. And then I worked a full-time job at 14, went out on the street at 15 with the clothes on my back, and that door did not swing both ways. My parents never, ever let me back in the house. They went out of the country on vacation after they put me out because they cared for me so much, you know. And I was good to my mother. My father took my mother's car away, and I went to a dealership, and I brought back a Pontiac Grand Prix, a 71 block long Pontiac Grand Prix. She stood in the doorway, shook her head. No, she didn't like it. It was black and white, gorgeous car. So then I brought her back a Pontiac Parisienne, which was smaller. She didn't like that. So in any case, I had bought a Mercury Marquis X100, which was a gorgeous car. It was autumn gold. And I came over the hill at 8:30 one morning in Rockville. Another boy in a autumn gold Ford Mustang came over the top of the hill, and between the two gold cars and the gold sun in both our eyes, we didn't see each other, and the boy T-boned my Marquis, almost cut the car in half. And the insurance company decided to rebuild the car, $7,400 worth of damage to the car, and they didn't write the car off. And so I had to buy another car in the meantime while my car was being put back together in the shop. And so when my Marquis came back, I gave the Ford Galaxy Police Edition Interceptor to my mother. And believe me, she made good use of it too. But that's a whole different story. But in any case, I took the Marquis back, and my father was very angry that I gave my mother a car when he had taken the car away from her. I did it for a couple reasons, you know, to show out with my father and to flex a little bit, that kind of thing. My reasons weren't exactly pure. But in any case, as things went along, and I worked for various garbage companies, and I beefed up and got rough around the edges and all of that other stuff, my father was actually impressed at one point because one of the guys at work had piddled on my brand new Lincoln. He climbed up on the trunk and piddled on the back window in the wintertime. So I had a brand new Lincoln with frozen piddle on the back window and scratches on the trunk. And so he and I got into a misunderstanding, and he just kept pounding me in the eye, and I almost lost my vision in the eye, and the eye was swollen and everything. I went over to visit my father. I had a flannel hillbilly shirt on and this great big black eye, and I broke the nose on the other guy. You know, I was like maybe 16 or 17 by then. And the other guy got me down in a gully off to the side of the road and was just pounding away. And the only thing that saved my life was I reached up with my cowboy boots and kicked him in the nose, and it broke his nose. And both of us were very bloodied, and a police officer came by. I think it was an angel, to tell you the truth. And this officer comes by, And he said, "Is there a problem, gentlemen?" And I'm looking up literally from the gutter at this cop, and both of us shake our head, "No, sir." He said, "Well, you need to get in your car and get out of here." And I fully expected that when Jimmy and I got back in the Lincoln, that the cop was going to let me drive 50 feet and then turn his lights on and take us off to jail. But that didn't happen. And again, I think it was an angel, because this other guy almost took my life. He beat me so bad. So that was the environment that I grew up in. My mother died, and I actually went to her funeral with a prostitute, a very pretty lady who looked like Helen Crump off the Andy Mayberry show. And she was just a friend. Nothing ever happened between us. She was a shoulder to cry on at my mother's funeral, and some eye candy to show off to the rest of the family, because they didn't know that she was an escort. That type of deal. But getting back to this morning, I'm watching Bear Independence Channel, and Bear always impressed me for his ruggedness and his, helping other people and all of that other stuff. And like he is mentioning Yah all the time. And again, I was confused. So I said, well, I didn't understand who Yah was. I heard of Yahweh. So I said, "Are you a Christian or a Messianic Jew?" And he called me a dumbass. He said, "I'm neither one, dumbass." And then he says, "Well, Christians and Jews are cursed or damned," something along those lines. You'll have to watch the video. It's his last situation report, Bear Independent Live, about Israel. And he says it right on camera. He calls me a dumbass. And then he says that Jews and Christians are cursed or damned because they've added to the Word of God or taken away from the Word of God. He's quoting the book of Revelation that says, "Cursed be you if you add to these words or take away from these words." But he doesn't even know his own, I forget the word in English for it. He doesn't even know where he stands. That's not the way to put it, but he doesn't even know his own dispensation or whatever you call it, because Jews don't use the New Testament, and the book of Revelation is in the New Testament. The Jews use the first 5 books of the Old Testament, which I think they call the Pentateuch, or maybe even the Torah. In any case, like I said, I've always been in search of the absolute truth, because the Bible intimates that there was an original language, and that the language was so powerful that you could speak things into being, in the heavenly language. And I'm not talking about that blabber jabber, jibby jabber, talking tongue stuff. When the apostles talked in tongues, it was actual languages that people understood. And when it called for an interpreter, it wasn't palabra jabber, "Thus says the Lord." It was this person just said that because it was an actual language. It was like somebody walking into a church where they only spoke French, and the guy doesn't speak French. So he asked somebody who speaks English, "What did they just say in French?" And the guy says, "Well, the pastor just said that." That's what it means by interpreting, tongues. It's not talking about palabra jabber, Jimmy jabber, somebody stole my bow tie, zip up my Honda, that kind of stuff. And then somebody stands up and says, "Thus says the Lord." No, it was like, this guy just said that in French. This is what they said. That's what it is. Sorry to disappoint some of you. But in any case, so I asked Bear, are you Messianic Jew or are you Christian? Because you're mentioning Yah, and I've heard of Yahweh, but I've not heard of Yah. And then he goes into we're the true this, we're the true that. And like I said, he called me a dumbass. And what a way to witness to somebody. If you want to bring somebody to soul salvation in what you believe, to call somebody who asks a legitimate question a dumbass, and then he breaks into this prayer and he puts his head in his hand and starts praying to Yah, about yours truly, being such a dumbass, and I would ask such a stupid question, like whatever, Lord help me and all that other stuff, the Lord Yah. And he doesn't believe in Jesus Christ or being. So I asked him, I said, well, are you born again? And the word says you must be born again to enter the kingdom of heaven. He goes, no, I'm not born again. I don't believe in all that crap and all this extra stuff that I'm like, chill, man. So I'm done with Bear Independent. He blew his witness to me, and I understand people have a bad day, but this guy was like off his rocker, out there. So he can say he takes his bulldozer to people's homes and help them clear trees and all this other stuff, but I'm done. I'm done with that guy. I was just flabbergasted. And so I checked my blood pressure, and for some reason, my blood pressure went way up because as a child, when I was being abused, everything would go into my subconscious. And I actually dealt with myself as another person. I was like, well, don't worry about it. We'll take care of it. So there actually became a duplicity to my personality, which was the person dealing in real time with the abuse. And then the other part of me that I would defer to handle the problem later on. By handling the problem, one year my father bought this 74 Honda CVCC, which was big as a coffee table. For some reason, we had a truce, and I came over to his house. For some reason, I only got called by anybody if they needed anything. So when I pulled up to his house, there was his little boxy Honda, 10-foot long car, if that, maybe 6 or 8 foot long Honda CVCC. I pull up with my Ford LTD with the great big cattle knocker bumpers that they had that year. I pull up like an inch from the back of his Honda. He comes right out to the front door. He goes, oh my, like Gilligan's, like a skipper out of Gilligan's Island. Oh my God, you bought the biggest thing that they had. You bought the, and see, I didn't play my hand. I didn't tell him that I was living in the car. And why it never occurred to me to buy a van with a bed, I will never know, because the LTD ate gas just as bad as a van would. And so the LTD was so beautiful that my boss took it and started driving it and left me with the company pickup truck. So in any case, one morning, my boss, Herbert McNasty, they called him. He said, "Hey, baby, I got some bad news for you. I just wrecked your LTD." And he wrecked it pretty good. And I said, "Well, Mr. McMurray, I have bad news for you. I wrecked your pickup truck." And what happened was Jimmy, the guy that I got into a misunderstanding with, we put a couple of Enduros on the back of the pickup truck, and we went up into the mountains of Boyd, Maryland, and pushed down a wire fence and drove the Enduros up into the mountains where they were clearing away a path for high tension wires. And so we're up there, and I flipped my bike and went wheel bike, wheel bike, wheel bike, wheel bike, all the way down the side of the mountain, and decided to call it quits. And at the bottom of the mountain was this well, and it had water coming up out of the well. And I got to tell you, it was the most beautiful tasting water I've ever had in my life. And it was getting near evening time anyway. So we put the bikes in the back of the pickup truck to get ready to leave. And all of a sudden, out in the distance, I heard pow. And then through the leaves of the trees, I heard zip, pow, zip, pow. And so Jimmy said, "Come on, man, they're shooting at us." And somebody was taking shots at us to let us know that we were trespassing. So in any case, when Jimmy was always trouble, so we got in the pickup truck, and he had the headlights turned on. I said, "You're going to get a shot. Turn the headlights off." So he turned the headlights off, and we come down the side of the mountain in the dark, and there's this creek or river. And in any case, we go to cross it at full speed, and the pickup truck is bouncing along in the river, and we hit these rocks, and the rocks took out the exhaust system. So the exhaust system's crushed and dangling beneath the truck, and the truck's going bum, 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 bum. And the bottom of the truck is crushed near the doors and the pickup body, where we've been bouncing along in the creek on these boulders, actually is what they were. And we came down off the mountain, ran over the wire fence and gate and everything, and took off down the road, dragging barbed wire and a little bit of wood and all this other stuff, with this person shooting at us. So anytime I got involved with Jimmy was trouble. And I learned after a while to not be available when he wanted to go to a bar or something. But you learn these things when you get older. And like I said, I didn't have any input from my parents or anything. It's just the good Lord kept me from a lot of things that should have happened. But in any case, that's what happened between me and Bear Independent this morning. So he was having a bad day. I'm disappointed. But if he thinks that's going to bring me to some sort of saving grace in what he believes, or if that's his way of proselytizing, to call somebody a dumbass for asking a legitimate question, then he's absolutely lost me. Poppy pops out.